With the cost of food, housing, and nearly all essentials on the rise, food banks are becoming increasingly vital for families struggling to make ends meet.
It's heartbreaking. We're seeing the highest level of food bank use in Canadian history.
There's another survey conducted by Rate Filter is showing a significant amount of Canadians are struggling with housing costs.
The Canadian way of life is being torn apart right beneath our noses, but unfortunately many people can't see what's happening. Remember the old Canadian dream where you could build a good life by working hard and spending wisely? That time is gone. In fact, Canadian families are currently being economically targeted for destruction by greedy corporations, corrupt government officials, and a vicious social and political ideology. The country has managed to rack up the largest debt level in Canadian history, created an unprecedented housing bubble, and out-of-control prices of essentials that families need to survive. This rising cost of living has made Canada an increasingly more difficult place to live. In this video, we're going to examine the 13 key signs proving that Canadian families are being economically destroyed. Starting with number 1. Canadians are spending way too much to put a roof over their heads. Among those who rent, 44% of Canadians are spending more than a third of their income on housing. Not only that, but 20% of homeowners are spending more than a third of their monthly income on housing needs. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC, recommends that the monthly housing cost should be less than 33% of a household's gross monthly income. Over the past decade, home prices have soared up to 151% in Ontario and huge percentages in other provinces, pushing many into homelessness. This leads to the next point, number 2. The cost of rent and mortgages in Canada is extremely high and unsustainable and is continuing to rise. The average cost of living in Canada is around $2,300 per month for rent or mortgage, food, and utilities. This rises to around $3,500 per month if you're living in Toronto or Vancouver. For a family of 4, the average monthly cost of living is around $6,100 in Toronto and $6,000 in Vancouver. Variable rate mortgages that can be changed every 5 years also make mortgages a minefield, as families don't know what they'll be faced with a few years down the road, even if they can afford their mortgage now. Liberal policies have worsened the situation, prioritizing immigration over housing, which brings us to the next critical issue. Number 3. Mass immigration is making housing harder to find and worsening per capita GDP. Justin Trudeau's stated goal of bringing in 500,000 immigrants per year is having a devastating effect on Canadian families. These millions of newcomers have worsened the housing crisis, inflation, and unemployment, creating a population trap where rapid population growth strains resources and brings down the standard of living. Families are being destroyed by this focus on population growth more than economic growth and are smeared as racists if they speak out. Number 4. Many families stuck working for minimum wage with very little wage growth to keep pace with inflation. Regular Canadian families are having an increasingly hard time living on minimum wage, especially as inflation keeps rising. Canada's housing crisis is intricately linked to its income crisis, as lower incomes make homeownership or renting nearly impossible. One recent survey revealed that 94% of low-income renters earning $50,000 or less annually view housing costs as a serious issue. It further found that 62% of low-income renters rate their household finances poorly. How is this sustainable? Families need higher wages, especially with the inflation that's strangling the economy. But for many families, those higher wages aren't becoming a reality. This leads to the next big issue facing Canadian families. Number 5. Dwindling savings and lack of an emergency fund for many families. Canadian families have less money saved than ever before, and fewer have a backup emergency fund in case of a medical emergency, natural disaster, or unforeseen crisis. A recent survey found that over half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, with nearly half having no emergency savings and relying on their next paycheck for financial security. A significant portion would resort to loans or credit cards during emergencies. Additionally, 1/5 of respondents are facing financial struggles, with some experiencing dire situations like bankruptcy or debt collections. What if there's an emergency? For many families, it would be the end of the line with nowhere to go. Number 6. Canadian taxes are sky high with no relief in sight. Canada has some of the highest taxes among developed nations, and it's only getting worse. This stifles family prosperity and hits family businesses hard. This staggering sales taxes and tariffs on every single thing Canadians buy also decreases customer patronage of family-run businesses who can't offer quite as low prices as the monopolistic big box stores and chains. Number 7. Consumer debt and credit card debt are out of control and driving families to desperation. Instead of saving money and planning for a brighter future, many families are struggling to pay off mountains of debt they already owe. It's an uphill battle, with average credit card debt hitting $4,265 in the third quarter of last year. Canadians increasingly rely on credit amid rising living expenses. Overall, consumer debt surged to $2.4 trillion in 2023, averaging $21,131 per person, excluding mortgages. This is mainly because of inflation impacting essentials like food and gas, post-pandemic spending, and interest rate hikes. This level of consumer debt and credit card debt is like a giant weight on those who are trying to raise kids in this overpriced climate. Number 8. Gas prices are way up with no sign of improvement. Gas prices in Canada are through the roof, and there's no real sign that it's going to change or improve, with prices expected to rise further this year. Although Justin Trudeau has blamed the emergency problems on Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the resulting sanctions, there are also big problems in Canada with delayed drilling and refinery starts, worsening supply shortages, and driving gas prices up. Transportation cost increases from the pandemic-related supply chain disruptions further contribute to inflation and gas price hikes. Then there are the carbon taxes that make gas even more expensive in Canada, as Trudeau punishes working families at the pumps and makes basic transportation to go to low-paid jobs even harder for the average person. Then you get to the high price of food. Number 9. Food costs have reached such a high level that more and more Canadian families are going to the food bank to survive. There were over 500,000 visits to food banks in 2023 in Ottawa alone, and the number is only going up. The average family of 4 is expected to spend around $16,300 on food in 2024, an increase of more than $700 from last year, compared to an increase of $1,065 in 2023. With food prices expected to go up around 5% this year, especially in baked goods, meat, and produce, Canadian families are set to feel even more pain just to put food on the table. The tumultuous 2023, marked by wildfires, flooding, and economic pressures, already strained Canadian families financially, leading to a record high 2 million food bank visits. Canadians are also purchasing less food of lower quality, reflecting growing affordability concerns. Lower quality food leads to more health problems, which brings us to Canada's horribly failing healthcare system. Number 10. Canada's healthcare expenses are up and the healthcare system is crumbling. Canada's healthcare system is vastly overburdened, with long wait times for surgery, overflowing ERs, misdiagnosis and medical errors skyrocketing, and overstrained staff. Despite escalating healthcare demands worsened by mass immigration, the government remains indifferent. Recent ER deaths like Alison Holthoff and Charlene Snow underscore systemic failures. Doctors and nurses endure burnout due to inadequate pay, heavy caseloads, and administrative burdens. Family physicians spend only 36 hours weekly on patient care out of 52, while surgeons see patients for 46 out of 62 hours. Nurses are similarly overwhelmed with administrative tasks, and federal funding covers only 22% of healthcare costs, aggravating the crisis amid rising addiction rates and hospital overcrowding. Families can't take much more, which leads to the next sad issue facing families. Number 11. Canada's life expectancy keeps falling, robbing families of time with loved ones. Canada's life expectancy keeps falling, which means shorter and unhealthier lives and less time with elderly loved ones for Canadian families. Statistics Canada reports a 3-year consecutive decline in the life expectancy of the average Canadian at birth, dropping from 82.3 years in 2019 to 81.3 in 2022. New Brunswick saw the most significant decrease in 2022, down to 79.8 years from 80.9 in 2021, while Saskatchewan experienced the largest decline over 3 years, dropping 2 years to 78.5 in 2022 from 80.5 in 2019. Sadly, this life expectancy issue isn't only hitting the elderly population. There's a notable increase in deaths among younger age groups, partly due to ongoing investigations by coroners or medical examiners, typically involving unintentional injuries, like substance-related toxicity deaths, suicides, and homicides. This brings us to the next critical problem that's tearing families apart in Canada. Number 12. Rising homelessness is hitting families hard and tearing apart communities. Homelessness and drug addiction are tearing Canadian families apart as more and more individuals end up on the streets with serious addictions and mental illnesses. Trudeau town tent cities and homelessness plague the nation, with an estimated 235,000 Canadians living without stable housing. Home ownership is now unattainable for 63% of non-homeowners, and rental costs just keep going up, reflecting the dire reality faced by many Canadians and helping explain why the homeless population keeps growing. Addiction is a huge drain on the economy and a heartbreaking reality for an increasing number of families as well. Number 13. Canada's addiction crisis has become an all-out epidemic, ripping families apart. Canada faces a worsening drug crisis extending beyond typical addicts to professionals and working-class individuals. Opioids drive a surge in overdose deaths, costing the healthcare system over $46 billion in 2017, with expenses rising since. Rising crime accompanies drug use, with large seizures barely making headlines. Despite lax drug laws in some provinces, public opinion on decriminalization is divided. The Trudeau government focuses on reducing stigma and providing culturally appropriate services. Conservatives promise a tougher stance on drugs. However, Canada's drug policies enable addiction, exacerbating homelessness and crime. Urgent action is needed, including harsh penalties for traffickers and a reversal of liberal drug policies. The crisis demands immediate attention to prevent further loss of life and damage to society. Let's be honest, Canada's soaring costs of living crisis is alarming, with housing, energy, and food prices skyrocketing. This past holiday season, 58% of Canadians relied on credit for holiday gifts, and 42% had to alter New Year's resolutions due to financial strain. Home prices continue to surge, while energy costs burden nearly 1 in 10 households. Grocery bills are escalating, with essential items like turkey and potatoes up significantly. Canadian families are grappling with record inflation, outpacing income growth and pushing families to their limits. The government's indifference worsens the crisis, prompting concerns about the future for native-born Canadians. Amidst rising discontent, the Conservative Party sees growing support, but faces skepticism regarding its ability to address the crisis effectively. A heartbreaking 92% of Canadians identify the high cost of living as the greatest risk to their children. Without urgent action, Canada risks further social and economic upheaval, pushing more Canadians into poverty or driving them to seek refuge elsewhere. The lockdowns during the pandemic did serious damage to most of the world, and Canada was hit hard in particular. Children were kept out of school and families were left economically impacted. Instead of learning their lessons from what happened during the pandemic, the Trudeau government has only accelerated their big government anti-Canadian ideology and policies. The massive inflation and out-of-control government spending has only worsened, and Canadian families are becoming victims of an accelerating economic decline. Canada is falling apart at the seams and changing in ways that nobody could have imagined even several decades ago. It's clear that the powers that be aren't on the side of Canadian families, and their policies and attitudes are only making things much worse. If you like this video and want to learn more about what's really going on in Canada, check out this video here. And if this video brought value to you today, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the video. Thanks for watching.